All right, thank you guys so much. We have a very, very, very fascinating video today, a discussion today. I am very thankful to our guest, Mr. Colin Sharpe. We've interacted online. I shamelessly sent him my own content, and he seemed to enjoy it enough, and he offered to talk, and I thought that was just the nicest thing ever. So I will be accompanied today by Colin Sharpe. We're going to be talking about political rationalism, maybe a little Peter Thiel, maybe a little Curtis Yarvin, some alt-right figures, even though we kind of had a discussion how that might not be the best label. So, Colin, thank you so much for joining me. And if you don't mind just kind of introducing yourself and explaining your background, thank you again.
Yeah. So I'm Colin Sharpe. I'm a student at Boston University. I'm actually majoring in philosophy. Um, as far as my background, I'm only 19 years old, so I don't have much of a background beyond reading. I haven't seen that much of the world. Obviously, I don't think you really can at this age. But yeah, I basically just I have my Twitter handle and I have what I read, and we'll sort of see what comes out of that, if anything. As far as my you could say my mental background, my academic background or whatever. I'd say I'm very interested in philosophy of technology, politics, how those intersect, theology, political theology, all of these things. I'm definitely very interested in it. Um, I would say that I come from a right wing perspective, which has always just been sort of an intuitive thing for me from a young age. But I've definitely, I read a lot of people on the left. I like the left. I think unfortunately these days they're kind of smarter than us, or maybe on average they're a little a higher human capital than us. Um, so yeah, that's basically my background on these issues. And if you go on my Twitter timeline, you would know I'm very into what we're about to talk about, which is rationalism, transhumanism, and the Peter Thiel network.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I admire you, man. You're a 19-year-old, someone this young, being so interested in the world, reading like this. When I was 19, I don't have any philosophy background. I was just trying to get girls, trying to play
Philosophy
sports.
of the streets.
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's correct. Yes. The School of Hard Knocks. That's right. Thank you again so much for coming on. So, rationalism was one of the key ideas, we'll say, that kind of brought us together. So, let me ask you one. As a philosopher, I'm sure you've heard this word before. What are some of your conceptions of rationalism? And out of all those conceptions that you might have heard, is there a particular one that you think is better than the others, or just kind of explain to me your understanding of that idea?
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's such an important question,
Hmm.
because when we talk about rationalism, right? People are going to have a lot of different ideas about what that is, depending on who they think of first, right? Because there are a wide variety of people who have called themselves rationalists. Like Rene
Hmm.
Descartes, Enlightenment era philosopher. He was a rationalist. People like Kant and Hume responded to him. This was hundreds of years ago. Very important. Now we have like there's a modern, rationalist movement, which caught up, you could say, in the Bay Area with blogs like Less Wrong. It's associated with people like Curtis Yarvin, although he doesn't call himself a rationalist, Peter Thiel, um, Eliezer Yudkowsky, all of these people, the effective altruism movement. all of these people will sort of adopt this rationalist label. Um, but obviously, when you go, a couple hundred years into the future, words and ideas have a funny way of sort of changing themselves, right?
Yep.
So here's how I would define rationalism for the sake of this conversation. I would define it as a complete mind body dualism. So if you're familiar about what that is, that's the belief that there exists a soul and a spiritual essence, your mind, which is distinct from your body and your like earthly existence, your worldly existence. Well, your mind is in the world. Your mind is also, these people would say, eternal, unlike your body. And the second corollary to that is that if you're a rationalist, you believe that the mind is fundamentally um, independent of the body, like we said, but also superior to the body, which means that um, it is better to know something and to think about something in theory, and logically in literally every instance, which, as I will get to later on, this is problematic.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
I'm someone, if I had to say it in a sentence, like, I'm a big fan of rationality. I'm a big fan of human rationality. I think it's, the most beautiful thing that God has given us, or
Yeah.
given anything in the world. I think it's more beautiful than the most beautiful landscape or star. However, I'm not a rationalist for reasons that we can get into later.
Yeah, essentially, there are aspects of the world and the human condition that were created by our pre rational and irrational faculties that are perpetually active and simultaneously efficacious. And it would be stupid to take the whole of what constitutes a human being, sector it to a part, and then treat the part as the whole. That is what all rationalists do. They take the whole, which is constitutes of measurable stuff with immeasurable stuff, with knowable stuff with unknowable stuff, and they sector apart from it to the quantifiably measurable and consciously known, and they treat it as if it's the only thing. It's the same problem with perspectivity. Think of the eye, right? So the eye obviously cannot encompass the entire world. You can't see the entire world with your two eyes. So there's a sort of compromise being made where you have a very limited sector of what you see, but what you do see in that sector confers a higher degree of clarity, order, and depth. Well, that's the same thing with rationality, right? So it kind of limits itself, but whatever you see within that limits, you confer a higher degree of, like I said, clarity, order, and depth. It's interesting that you talked about the mind body dualism. One, and maybe you disagree with this. I don't think there's a dualism between the mind and body. I think psychosomatic proves it. I don't think the mind is separate from the body. Two, and you can see arguably the rationalism on display because if you posit one thing, mind, against the body in a dualistic sense, well, you have to privilege one or the other, right? So clearly, Descartes has privileged the mind. I think that was a mistake. So yeah, some interesting stuff there. Some very interesting stuff there. You mentioned how rationalism, and I like your point also, by the way, about efficient rationality, as I like to call it. Now, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Just kind of bring it back to its reasonable balance. We don't need to throw out rationality entirely. But we talked. You kind of mentioned how rationalism is applied in the political sphere. Things like Thiel. How does someone like Peter Thiel, in your mind, embody or transmit rationalism through his actions and beliefs?
Yeah. So I mean, just to clarify first, like, Peter Thiel is definitely a right rationalist, as opposed to a left one. Like, I would say someone like Karl Marx and a lot of people who he inspired, they were definitely rationalists, and which I think is pretty non-controversial. Marx famously said that he believed in a scientific socialism, right? It was a scientific and philosophical state, which you really can't get much more rationalist than that. Then we're saying we will build up our society on the basis of our scientific political theories. I think Teal is a rationalist, but from a right wing lens, which means that he's still not, Peter Thiel is not an egalitarian. He's famously like a hyper capitalist. He wrote that he said, I don't think freedom and democracy are compatible. And if it were up to him, he would get rid of democracy, but not freedom. So he's a hyper capitalist. You could say individual license and everything. So he's coming at it from a different lens, but he still definitely is a rationalist because the people who he is opposed to, which I want to get into, um, he he calls them Luddites, right? So here's a quote that I have. It's from a very recent interview. I think he did this like a week ago. It just got released by the Washington Post. He said, in the 21st century, the Antichrist is a Luddite who wants to stop all science. It's someone like Greta or Eliza. Greta Thunberg, I would say, not a
No,
rationalist.
no.
Um, he Eliza definitely sort of is, but he's a AI phobic, technophobic rationalist.
Mm,
Um, and he says maybe these things are good or bad. Stopping them seems far, far worse. If the internet or AI deranges some people, but we have to shut it down altogether, that feels like out of the frying pan into the fire, a cure far worse than the disease. So you see here Peter Thiel and people like him in his orbit, people like Alex Karp, who wrote The Technological Republic. You see in them this like daring, you could almost say like Faustian embrace of technology, embrace of AI, um, which is good. I'll say this out of the gate. Um, there are parts of rationalism or things that rationalists say, I would rather say, that I like.
hmm
Um, when Peter Thiel warns about Greta Thunberg being the Antichrist, I definitely understand what he means by that, right? Because I I don't want to live in a world where we shut off all progress or all like technological progress and all development because of like peace and safety, right? I mean, like, would you maybe agree?
Oh, I completely agree. I think
Yeah,
one of the points. Anytime you hear me say rationalism to someone new, you can always be sure I'm going to say the following sentence: I'm not against rationality. I'm against rationalism. It would be suicidal to give up all the benefits that rationality has brought you. I would not want to live in that world. I just don't like
yeah,
it when it goes too far. But yes, you are
yes,
absolutely correct. We can
yes.
integrate rationality with these other aspects, mythological, religious, spiritual, intuition, all this stuff, and we can have a great life, not just, do what the teals of the world want us to do.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, when he talks about um Greta Thunberg, I think he's correctly basically saying that these people are like afraid
Mm-hmm.
of like the human mind and human rational faculties. Maybe that's because they feel like they themselves are maybe less capable than other people. So they want to sort of shut it down, right?
Yeah.
Um, there's a great quote from Nietzsche about this in Beyond Good and Evil, where he's talking about the free spirits. Tito didn't say this, but I think it is very instructive and maybe sort of argues against this Greta Thunberg type person in a better way than he did. So I'll read it off here. Audience, bear with me. It's a bit of a long quote. It'll probably take like a little over a minute to read it. Um, but he says, in saying this, I have a duty to us real free spirits to blow away from us all of the ancient and stupid prejudice and misunderstanding, which has all too long obscured the concept free spirit like a fog. In all the countries of Europe and likewise in America, there exists at present something that misuses this name, a very narrow, enclosed, chained up species of spirits who desire practically the opposite of that which informs our aims and instincts. Not to mention the fact that, in regard to those new philosophers appearing, they must certainly be closed windows and bolted doors. They belong, in short, and regrettably, among the levelers, these falsely named free spirits, eloquently and tirelessly scribbling slaves of the democratic taste and its modern ideas, quote, men without solitude, one and all, without their own solitude, clumsy fellows who, while they can't be denied courage and moral respectability, are unfree and ludicrously superficial, above all, in their fundamental inclination to see in the forms of existing society the cause of practically all human failure and misery, which is really to stand the truth happily on its head. What with all their might they would like to strive after is the universal green pasture, happiness of the herd with security, safety, comfort, and an easier life for all. Their two most often recited doctrines are, quote, equality of rights and, quote, sympathy for all that suffers. And suffering itself they take for something that has to be abolished.
Hmm.
So we see here, especially in the end of the quote, where he talks about how this person, this hypothetical person, they are striving after security and safety, right? Peace and safety. They want comfort and the easy life. They don't want any suffering. They say, "Hey, I'm in Sweden. I'm Greta Thunberg. Like my life's already awesome. I don't want to take any risk from AI, right? I would rather continue to have my 1.3 children and sort of like consume, Reddit videos until the culmination of my sad, miserable existence. So yeah, these people, I would almost call them like left anti-rationalists.
That's a perfect way to put it.
If you want a more pejorative way, the audience would recognize these are hippies.
Yeah.
He's talking about hippies, which Peter Thiel also talked about hippies a lot. And you see these people now in 2025, right? The left, I think, unfortunately, is way more, AI skeptic than the right. Um, Many leftists who I talk to, they think that AI is basically just a paper tiger. They're
Yeah.
like, but what about the data centers? Um, what about this? What about that? So in summation, he is very, very correct to point out this like fear of like real human progress, human striving, human innovation in some of these people who, despite being on the left, they are afraid of anything new, right? And they're afraid of like what the rational mind can produce. That's why these are the same people who are like very against like nuclear power,
Mhm.
which I think is which I think is terrible. Um, it's total travesty. Like the German Green Party and
Like
how,
being against nuclear power or
yeah,
nuclear power itself is a travesty.
they're against both. They would say
Yeah.
they're totally. I mean, you look at the it was stronger in the 80s, but you look at the green movement in Germany now, if the Germans just built nuclear power plants, they wouldn't be in this terrible geopolitical
Yeah.
situation. Not to get off track, but they wouldn't be in this terrible geopolitical situation right now with the Russians,
Hmm.
where the Russians sort of have an energy stranglehold over
Yeah.
them. So yeah, just to sort of we've we've now, I'd say, appropriately steelmanned this right rationalist, techno rationalist argument, and I've said where I agree, because I'm sort of almost, you could say, in between the right rationalists and these hippies or whatever on the left who want to throw the baby out with the bathwater, right?
Yeah.
So with that in mind, though, I'm going to bring up his second quote, which this is where he really gets into, I would say, dangerous territory where his arguments, he really loses me. Peter Thiel said this in his interview with Ross Douthat. It's a pretty famous video. It's where he said he waited for a couple of seconds on if the human race should endure or not. It's a very popular meme.
Yes.
But in fairness to him, I'm going to use another quote. Maybe, listen, he's also on a lot of stimulants. Maybe he just sort of didn't get the
We'll steal,
question.
man, and we'll be charitable. There's no need
Yes,
to not be,
yes, yes.
why?
So yeah, so here's a more long-winded quote from him where he's talking about transhumanism. So he says transhumanism is this ideal, it was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body. We want more transformation than that. We want you to be able to change your heart, change your mind, and change your whole body. And then Orthodox Christianity, he says, the critique Orthodox Christianity has of all of this is these things don't go far enough, that transhumanism is just changing your body, but you also need to transform your soul and you need to transform your whole self. Um, this is where there are basically two like really bad errors that he makes here, which they honestly make me question like whether his Christianity is totally sincere, because he is a very intelligent man who did study under Rene Girard, and this statement is just so theologically problematic on the onset. And the first problem with this here is that under Christianity, transhumanism of the soul is an oxymoron,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or it'd be more accurate to say that Christians do believe in a transhumanism of the soul. They've been practicing it
Hmm.
for thousands of years. It's called the Eucharist,
Yeah.
right? Where you, at least under Catholic doctrine, who believe in real presence, you eat the and drink the body and blood of God, and that transforms your
Hmm.
soul,
Hmm.
in the Christian view, and that's what your path to salvation is. And I would say, really, the beautiful part about it is that, unlike technology or progress, it doesn't change. Your path to salvation under Christianity is the same path that an illiterate peasant in France had 1800 years ago. You like get baptized, you confess your sins, and imploringly, you have to receive the Eucharist, which is the transhumanism of the soul, right?
Yeah.
And the problem with these rationalists is that either they're, most of them are outright atheists. They're not Christian or any other religious tradition, like Curtis Yarvin, atheist, um, Nick Land, kind of like a weird version of atheist. Scott Siskind, atheist. Um, Most of the effective altruists, like Sam Bankman-Fried are very, they're pretty much atheists. They're very non-religious Jews. And the problem with that is that they still have this calling to some sort of a spiritual salvation, a rational, but they don't have God. They don't have a deep belief in God. This has been lost in them. So they try to replace it with tech technology. Like I think I could fairly quote Teal here. He's basically saying that like technology and like bio augmentation, um, which will maybe at one point even impact their mind. This is sort of the new Eucharist. It's the priesthood for like the unbelievers, right? Who, despite on being unbelievers, they don't want to be like the totally nihilistic leveling hippie type like the Greta Thunberg type might be. So they need something to justify their existence, and they make it technology and sort of like human rationality itself. And look, like I get it, right? Like if I was in that position, maybe I would do that too. But the problem is that when he compares it to Christianity, it's just theologically out of left field. It's totally wrong.
Yeah.
So I've been talking for a while. I was wondering do you have any questions about what I'm saying? Maybe questions that you think the audience might have.
Well, I'm interested about delving into the psychology of what you said. So, um, I want to get, if it's okay, I want to get into the psychology of. I think you made a really great point about once God is cut, something else has to take its place. And I
Yes.
think there's a psychological thing. Do you know what a numinous experience is?
Um. Okay, I've read the Critique of Pure Reason, so I'm aware of like Kant's definition of the noumenal, but I don't know what a nuministic
So a
experience.
numinous experience is exactly that, an experience. It's important because it's the
Okay.
experience that underlies all religions. It's an experience. You can understand it mentally, but it is an experience in which you behold something, you encounter something that is so otherly, it is so fascinating and seemingly magical that it overwhelms your rational faculties. And so you impart a spiritual power called mana that upscales its ability, right? So think of it when I go to Timbuktu in Africa. And let's say I have a Sprite can, I leave the Sprite can. If I go back 10 years later, guess what? They're going to be ritualizing that Sprite can because this Sprite can, even something this simple, overwhelms their rational mental abilities. So now it becomes a object that needs to be ritualized and yeah, that kind of thing.
So sort of like, I mean, this is a pop culture reference. Maybe, fortunately, I think my younger viewers might not even know this, but if you're an older viewer, if you know that scene in 2001, A Space Odyssey, where the monolith comes down,
Yes, yes,
and then
yes.
yes,
Perfect.
it's
Yes,
just this out of this world thing.
yes.
It's
Perfect.
nothing like the rest of the environment. So the
It,
hominids start worshiping it, and through the worship of the monolith, they gain the self confidence to start developing like primitive technology, which they use to kill the other hominid band. So
Perfectly
yeah,
said.
that's
Perfectly
an
said. Think of it
yeah,
like
yeah,
a
yeah.
little kid with a thunderstorm, right? Doesn't
Yes.
understand, starts crying. Okay. So human beings have not always obviously been rational robots walking around. If you go back to 30,000 BC, we didn't really have a ton of rational faculties. So pretty much every experience was a numinous experience. Everything was magical. Now, of course,
Right.
once you have rational knowledge over this, all that magical power, all that spiritual stuff is extracted, right? Because if you know the storm is not actually a god doing some crazy stuff,
It's
and
not as
you're
interesting.
exactly.
Yeah.
So what's happened is we've essentially extracted all these numinous experiences through rationalism. It's gone too far. This is the meaningless, this is part at least, the meaninglessness that everyone is complaining about. So I would say since Darwin, since Nietzsche and Darwin, I'd say, the heights of the heavens, right, that's been cut ever since Darwin, in my personal opinion. So a similarity between rationalist atheists and spiritual whatever is that the spiritualist people are trying to excavate the heavens to find the non-conscious foundations of life. Once that gets cut, those same energies get employed to the terrestrial sphere, to Earth. There is a reason that science and all these different things developed at the same time. It's because all that was cut, and now we redirected those energies towards science.
Yeah.
So that
Yeah.
that was kind of the psychology, I think, of some of these rationalist guys, where the reason why science and rationality takes the place of God is, one, they need to, because our pre-rational, irrational faculties require it. Two, it's possible that they themselves have had a numinous experience when it comes to science. You see this all the time.
Yeah.
That's why scientists get into science, because they see a sort of magic about, which is great, by the way. Stop trying to ruin that for everyone else. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I definitely know it. I mean, first off, I think even regular people have. I don't know if to call it a numismatic experience, but I mean, people are in wonder. I think, especially of like the cosmos.
Yeah.
Everyone always likes to look at the Hubble telescope,
Mm-hmm.
and I think yeah, that is valid. Definitely, it's valid to be curious about the world. And I would agree. It's like they are, they're searching for God, even if they don't even know it. They're searching for God in rationality,
Mm-hmm.
science, technology, because they've like grown tired of like regular science. Like they
Yeah.
don't want, which is that's where I think it's very problematic. And that sort of gets to my like even bigger critique here of like rationalism, which is like rationalism is this it's this assumption that like our minds and our thinking component of ourselves is basically not only superior to our body but can even be abstractly conceived as being all that there is.
Yeah.
And I think that's a big problem because you look at these rationalists and they seem to, I think a lot of the reason why people are interested by them is that they're able to make these quite like bombastic and brash pronouncements because they're so confident because they've forgotten about, you might say, I would say the more Dionysian bodied earthly realistic aspect of ourselves, and they think that they can sort of totally overcome that and supersede that and create, as Peter Thiel was saying, a transhumanism of the soul.
Yeah.
We're going to basically like find God in rationality and become our own gods on the way. And this is the main problem and the scary part of rationalism is that it's a lack of awareness of, you might say, the chaotic, and it's a very naive like lack of awareness of the darker aspects, the more primitive aspects of life. It's a lack of awareness of like original sin.
Yeah.
Like that's why like the like Nietzsche famously he called Christianity, he's more famous. I'm sorry for that digression here. He's more famous for saying that the last man and like atheists in the future we're going to be nihilistic. He also called like Christianity itself had nihilistic quantities to it because Christianity set strict limits on people,
Mm-hmm.
right? Christianity said that like you are born in sin,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like comparative religion scholars like Camille Paglia, when they talk about born in sin, what that means is that Christians believe that we're not just born with this good, rational, striving mathematical element, sorry, which we do have, and we should use that and celebrate it. But we also have to be aware of like our reptilian brain. You know what I mean? Of our more primal, deeper aspect of ourselves. You know, there's a great quote from another '80s movie here, Conan the Barbarian. I don't know if you've seen it, but the like main character who's played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, his catchphrase, if you will, is crush your enemies and hear the lamentation of their women, right? Um, this I would argue is sort of more like that that orientation, that striving. This is actually far more fundamental to the human, like your human experience, than rationalistic philosophy, than developing technology. Because ultimately, and I would say, unfortunately, I'm not happy that we're born in sin.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, these rational energies are really directed in service of our selfish will, right? And you see this with these rationalist people. They seem to, not to get into anyone in particular, but they're leading these defense contractors, which are sort of in bed with foreign governments, and they're they're all sort of accused of being exploitative to people in their personal lives, even. And I would say it's because of this. It's this naive. It's rationalism. It's this naive like self confidence in yourself, right?
Yes. It's
Because you're saying
arrogance.
like
It's arrogance.
yes, you're saying me and my brain, we are fine the way we are. We don't have original sin. We're even if we believe in God, we're not God fearers.
Mm-hmm.
We don't fear God. We actually want to use technology to sort of build his kingdom on earth, or meet him on earth. And yeah, I mean, I'd be curious to see like what you think about it, but that to me is like the scariest element of rationalism, which is that because these people, they don't believe in a Dionysian and like a darker, like drunk,
Mm-hmm.
passionate side of human existence, because they don't seem to emphasize this or have this. Um, that side of them will creep into their, unbeknownst to them. It will Freud, if you want to get Freudian, their id will
Mm-hmm.
creep into their, what they see as their rationalist proclamations, and without that sort of like awareness of the irrational stopgap,
Mm-hmm.
they are prepared and will be prepared to basically excuse anything, if it will help their project. So that's what I am most, on a broad abstract level, that's what I'm most afraid of with them. I think that they're pretty naive and very overconfident. We're not going to be getting salvation on earth. We've tried it before and it wasn't pretty.
Yeah, that was a really great rundown. I really like the point you made about essentially what integral consciousness does. It recognizes that the pre-rational, irrational, and rational create and condition each other, and they're always efficacious. They are always present. They are simultaneously present. And that's exactly, I think, what you're getting at when you say they're not aware of this dark Dionysian principle.
Yes.
Yeah, that's because you've sectored the part from the whole, transposed the whole onto the part. And I think it's very, very fascinating that you say dark Dionysian, right? So, what does rationality to do? It operates, one, in diurnal waking consciousness. It's kind of hard to be rational when you're dreaming. Two,
Mm.
it illuminates it illuminates, but there are some aspects of the world and the human condition that are permanently dark mysteries. God
Yes.
is essentially a giant mystery. You cannot reduce God to a concept and pretend that that is all there is. It's not going to happen. Every time I see Alex O'Connor versus Trent Horn or whoever, I don't even bother anymore. It's a complete waste of time. You are wasting your time.
Yeah.
Um,
I know what you mean by that.
yeah, but that's the whole
Which
point.
yeah, like I mean, in their fairness, like even though I'm not a new atheist, obviously, I disagree with them. I mean, I like Alex O'Connor.
Mhm.
I think you could say about him that he is sincere.
Yeah,
Which
he's well
that's what
intentioned.
I'll watch anyone who and I'll try to learn from anyone or disagree with anyone who I think is sincere. He's someone who I think, he's not a believer, but he does take these problems very seriously, and you can tell in his videos that he is trying to think
Yeah.
and engage with the other side. He's not a pure polemicist, right? Which
No,
I
yeah, I think he's well intentioned. I just,
yeah
unfortunately, he's trying to snipe God, and instead of using a sniper rifle, he's using boxing gloves, and I don't think he sees that. And at a certain point, it's nothing personal, but you're never going to catch God with
yeah.
boxing gloves. So why even watch you bother? It's nothing personal. He does. You are right though. He does seem like you can kind of tell differences with rationalism with intention, which also speaks to their pre-rational drives. So I think Alex is operating on a pre-rational drive to attain truth, to confer order on the world, and generally make the world a better place. Some of these guys who are more destructive, they have more nihilistic drives operating them that are just kind of think like your Foucault. I think almost his entire philosophy is driven by this pre-rational drive to tear down for whatever. That's a separate argument, though.
Foucault, you were saying?
Yeah, in my personal,
Well,
I hate
I mean,
Foucault. I
yeah, I
despise
mean,
Foucault.
not to. I mean, like we'll keep it PG here, but I mean, if you're a viewer, like you can look into his personal life.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think. I mean, I agree. I agree with Nietzsche. I don't agree with Nietzsche on everything, but one thing Nietzsche also said was that ad hominem is the best argument sometimes, and I definitely agree with that. Even like on Twitter, even if people will make an ad hominem insult at me, I'm not even that angry. Like it's valid.
yeah,
That's actually a valid, and that's another problem with you could say modern people, soulless people. Like whenever you're arguing with some like nerd or whatever, they're like, oh, like ad hom. It's
yeah.
like, no, like you're a person. I'm arguing with a person, not with a
Yes.
concept, actually.
Yeah.
And that what you're arguing for, the concept that you're putting forth, it is actually like affecting who you are as a person. So
Yes.
yes, like and especially with Foucault, I'm not gonna, but you can get into some accusations about his personal life. I think that definitely has an impact on what he's arguing for philosophically. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
wasn't there some philosopher's line about this where I judge the tree by the fruit it produces or something like that?
I'm not
It's
familiar with that, but it
it's pretty
sounds
good, right? It's pretty
yeah,
good.
yeah. I would agree with that sentiment. Yeah.
Yeah, your point about religion and the dark aspects, the dark Dionysian aspects, I think was really great. Interesting to know, religion derives from the etymological root religere. Do you know what that originally meant?
Doesn't it mean to believe,
Well,
like to have faith?
it started off, I can't remember the exact etymological
Religio, right?
subtleties, but there was one where religion
A
originally
Latin
meant
root.
careful observance.
I could be wrong about that,
I
but
think it was careful observance first, but then it got switched. Then it no longer became careful observance. It became to tie back or constrain. Why would you need to tie back or constrain? You're tying back your mental, rational faculties
yeah,
so they don't go too far. And
yes,
essentially, what you're doing is you're keeping your soul where it belongs. You are tying
yes,
back your soul.
yes,
I think that's very interesting.
yes.
And
It
it,
is.
go ahead. I'm
That's how
sorry.
I see my religion, or how I think about it. I think it is like a check on me,
Yes.
a a tie back on me, and even I mean even like atheists will talk about this in a very like flippant way. They'll be like, "Oh, you believe in Sky Daddy, Sky Father." It's like no, but it's like yeah, like I actually kind of do.
Yeah, there's
And
a spiritual
that is,
principle
yeah,
at
yeah,
play.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah, because even because here's the thing, and I realize this even as I'm still kind of a kid, but I'm kind of an adult. I'm a young adult. I'm
Mhm.
19. Um, adults don't actually, they're given this authority over children, but they don't actually know that much more than kids, and they're
Yeah.
not even necessarily that much more emotionally mature. So that's why, yes, it is actually necessary for you to have a like sort of like maternal and paternal relationship with God,
It's-
even as you're an adult, because even if you're a very mature and well thought adult, when you're coming into these temptations and problems in the world, like yes, you do need some grounding from some sort of unapproachable higher figure that your parents used to be, right?
yeah. Well,
Um,
there's tons of
yeah.
there's tons of instances, even in contemporary 2025 life, where you're going to go through, kind of like what you were talking about with the original sin. What I would characterize that is the death pole of the soul. So the soul is kind of constituted in this polar 2D circle, in my opinion. There's a life pole with all these life affirming aspects, and then there's the life negating aspects. That's the death pole. So things like suffering, pain, think death cult, stuff like that. And I cannot believe I just forgot what I was about to say. Um, the point is, oh, that's right. So there are going to be points in your life. I hope this doesn't happen, but think the death of a child. Think your house burning down. Think maybe you lose a limb in a terrible accident. Whether you want to call these numinous experiences, like we kind of talked about earlier, either way, it's going to overwhelm your rational. That's going to streamline right into
Yes.
your soul. It is you are not
Yes.
you are delusional if you think you're going to be able to rationally, logically, just kind of logic your way out of that. It's not going to happen, and you need to rely on things like a spiritual other side, if you will, or
Yeah.
mythology, or something, some sort of spiritual to get you through. Because man, sometimes life can be rough, man.
Yes. Yes. And you do need to sort of, yeah. That's why, just to clarify something, when I was talking about they're unaware of like the dark Dionysian, I think the Dionysian is necessary and
Yeah,
can even be good. Like I mean, you are engaging with the Dionysian when at least I do when I throw on a Giants shirt and I
Mhm.
scream at the TV when they're playing the Eagles.
Yeah, true.
That is a lot of fun. Like it's not dark or bad necessarily. It's a necessary outlet for your pre-rational, irrational passions, right? And
Yeah,
it's not that they're bad, it's just that it's so important to be aware of them
yeah,
so that they don't cloud and sort of implicitly influence your Apollonian like judgment
yeah,
faculties, right? That's really all it is. It's not that I'm because I would say more that the rationalists are like against it or whatever. I'm
yep.
not against it at all. I'm just saying you have to be very, very aware of these things.
Yeah, that was a really great example because sports really is. I've made this own realization. Sports is a perfect way, and I get really angry at. You actually see this on the right a lot, but right wing people who want to get rid of sports because they think it's stupid. What you're
Uh,
doing is well. Think about what you said, right? So you are 100% correct. That sports is almost entirely pre-rational and irrational, pre-rational instincts, irrational stories, irrational meaning. You're 100% correct. But think about what we're doing. We're able to condition these pre-rational and irrational aspects, which can be very bad when employed in an area where they don't belong, which is say science, logic, vaccine, stuff like that. Same thing with rationalism. Rationality is not bad; it becomes bad when you employ it in areas where it doesn't belong. So we take all these bad pre-rational and irrational, but because we have rationality, we can condition these other two and instead create healthy channels like sports for these irrational and pre-rational aspects. So I think it really shows the interplay
Wait,
of
one of the last thing I'll say on this though is funny you say that. My grandmother, she was very like anti football, basically, because she was like a very religious Catholic,
mhm,
and basically, I think in my dad's house, like it was mostly sons and men, right? And they would all like watch football on Sunday, like right after church, and it kind of took away the like Christian
yeah, yeah,
day her.
Yeah.
So she called it a barbaric ritual. No, and it's this is still like a family joke. Like my uncles will like joke about it or whatever. No, but I think it is very true. But
Yeah.
that's actually a good thing. Like
Yeah.
we do actually need like barbaric rituals in 2025,
Yes.
even when we will always need them, even though if someone was like, oh, it's the current year, like, yeah, well, these are still the same people that were like cheering at like guillotine
Yeah.
executions
Yeah.
200 years ago, who were um like putting other people into chattel slavery. So yes, like we actually do need to satisfy that
Yeah.
in like a war with rules,
Yeah.
which is sports, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I definitely agree with that point about sports, definitely.
Yeah. Well, it's cool that they called it barbaric. I'm a soccer fan. They just call me a loser, so that's nice.
Yeah.
Do you want to finish up on Yarvin, or are you in a rush? Or
I think honestly we've sort of said everything that's important to say. We
yeah,
finished it with like a lighthearted
yeah.
point, or whatever, that I think is very emblematic of what we were talking about, though, this
Okay.
dual nature and distinction. So, yeah, I think we're probably good to end it here.
Okay.
Uh,
Cool.
yes.
If you want to understand time as an intensity, which is very new and very kind of, I don't want to say hippy dippy, but different, but you just did it right there. You said it's time to end. You didn't reference the clock necessarily. You referenced your feelings and how the qualities felt, but that's a separate point. Are there any last any last things you want to say?
Oh, yes. So just because I imagine I'll put this up on my Twitter, but I imagine you'll put it up on your YouTube
Yep.
channels. For the people on the Idols of the Cave YouTube channel, if you want to see more of my content, my short form writing, you could go on my Twitter. My Twitter handle is Colin J Sharpe, one word, capital J in the middle, and one L in Colin. So yeah, you can search that up. You can go through my timeline, and if you like it, you can follow me.
Awesome. Thank you, man. The one thing, final thing I'll say before I say thank you is I am begging you to read this book. This is
Okay.
not a really good philosopher. This is a genius. This
All
is
right.
someone who is 200 years ahead. I am begging. No philosopher knows who this guy is. And the dude's just different. The dude is just different. If you like anything I said in here, it pretty much all came from him. Colin, thank you so much. I really, really want to I appreciate it so much that you would reach out and you would kind of follow through. It really just means a ton to me. I found this to be very meaningful, very informative, and I had a great time. And I just want to say thank you so much.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, guys, we will end it there. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye bye.